Well, hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's live stream. My name is Tesla Tom, and welcome to the Ludicrous Feed live on Thursday night. Nice to see you all indeed. So glad you can join us tonight on this beautiful Thursday night, at least here in Sydney anyway. And nice to see all the viewers on the live stream as well, in the live chat, and welcome to all of you. And welcome to you at home as well, watching on replay. Thanks for joining us. We've got a very important topic tonight, and that is the truth about electric vehicle fires. And yeah, we've got a very special guest lined up tonight to help discuss that topic indeed. So hello everyone, once again in the live chat and also watching on replay at home as well. And I want a quick shout out to all the members who have joined us tonight. I can see a few of you guys there. I've got Riz Akhtar, Harrison Kwa, Greg Wilson, and Alexander Mark Stein. So thank you very much, members. And of course, you're always welcome to join the Ludicrous Feed membership. Just have a look at that join button here in the video description below. All right, so without further ado, I'm just going to introduce our guest tonight, actually. Let's just pop her bio on the screen here. All right, so Emma is our guest from EV FireSafe, Emma Sutcliffe. Emma is an EV early adopter, and she charges her transport and life from an off-grid home. Emma co-founded an EV charging company in 2018 and then went on to establish several other electric vehicle sector businesses focused on charging software, EV knowledge, and the conversion of classic cars to electric. Now funded by the Department of Defense, Emma and an all-female team have built EV FireSafe, a world-leading research database and knowledge hub for emergency responders attending electric vehicle battery fires that aims to enhance safety at emergency incidents involving electrified transport. And I don't know about you guys, but I am certainly looking forward to this very important topic about electric vehicle battery fires. And joining us right now is Emma from EV FireSafe. Hello, Emma.
Hi, Tom. How are you going?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good. Thanks very much for having me on. I'm going to apologise in advance if I'm squinting tonight. I managed to sit on my glasses this week, and I've had to tape them up like Harry Potter. And I tried the Harry Potter spell, but it didn't work. So I'm going to be a little short-sighted tonight. I apologise.
No, not at all. It's all good. We can hear you nice and well, so it's all fine from our end anyway. So Emma, we're going to chat about, of course, electric vehicle battery fires, and we've got a presentation as well, which I'm going to pull up for you.
Sure.
In 1 second. So this is Emma's presentation about EV FireSafe. So yeah, Emma's going to lead the way tonight. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I thought I'd start with a little bit of a backstory, so you can flick over a slide there. So this is where it all started. So this is an aerial shot of the town where I live, a place called Little River. We're kind of halfway between Melbourne and Geelong. This is December 2018, 44-degree day, really strong northerly winds. And in that red circle there, you can just see a few little dots. One of them is someone's house, a local resident's house. I don't know them, never met them. And also the truck that I was on that day. So I'm a CFA volunteer. I'm a volunteer firefighter. And I was on Little River Tanker 2 that day. And as you can see, it was a pretty big grass and scrub fire. And it was certainly the biggest fire I've attended. And we'll show a few more photos, but I should have said if anybody's been through a bushfire, maybe just a bit of a trigger warning there. We've got a few little images of that coming up.
Yeah, thank you.
And if you go through to the next one, this was what I could see from the truck. And when I was standing, the image on the right there is from when I was standing kind of between the truck and the house. That was the wall of smoke we could see, and it was a pretty big day. And on the day, I'd actually been out of town. I'd gone out shopping, and I had about 8 or 9 months beforehand had bought a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, a Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid, which I was charging from my off-grid house. And I was out of town, came back in when the pager went off, and had to dump the car at a police checkpoint and just jump straight on a truck. And I didn't get back to the car for about 8 hours. And if you could flick to the next slide, unfortunately, This was what was left. So I parked it in the wrong spot. The fire went underneath the car. The battery didn't catch fire that day, but obviously you can. And if you go to the next slide, you'll be able to. You can kind of see right into the engine bay. That was how hot that fire was burning. So, and go to the next slide. This was it being loaded up later that night. So this was kind of what started in the thought process in my head of, as a CFA volunteer, I know how to fight a grass fire. We're pretty good at, we're excellent at doing that. But would I have known if that car, if my Outlander had gone into what we call thermal runaway and the battery had ignited, could I have possibly, accidentally started a second fire front on that day? Would we have known? Would I have known what to do as a volunteer in order to control a fire like that? And the answer was no. So to start looking into it, I just kind of piecemeal as I had a bit of money, I hired a researcher called Kira, who's hopefully on tonight. Hi, Kira, you're awesome.
Hi, Kira.
And we started just pulling together incidents from around the world and trying to take learnings from what had happened and how fire brigades and emergency responders had managed those incidents. And that kind of grew and grew. And then a couple of years ago, I was working with on a project with Department of Defence, and they're starting to electrify their fleet. And I mentioned it to them, and they very kindly gave me a little bit of seed funding to pull a team together. And if you flick to the next slide, we have a team. So Kira is there on the left, Lisa, Annie, and myself, with Stephen's. So Stephen's a friend who lives down the road who is responsible for me buying a Tesla. That's his Model 3 there that we're standing. We're pretending it belongs to us, but it's actually Stephen's. Hopefully he's on tonight too. And specifically what we were looking for was electric vehicle battery fires where the vehicle's connected to energized charging. I was working in the charging sector, so I wanted to understand what happens when we have that situation, because as a firefighter, you've got this lithium-ion battery fire, which is difficult to manage, and we'll talk about that. But potentially we've also got an energized electrical fire if the vehicle's connected to a charging unit, AC or DC charging unit. So when we started asking the question and having a look and kind of really putting some formality around the loose database that we had, we realized that actually this information doesn't exist anywhere. So we built that database. It's now, as far as I know, it's the only one that goes into the detail. We drill down into a great amount of detail. So things like, for instance, we capture whether or not bystanders described the popping noise that is a characteristic of a battery fire. That kind of level of detail, we really try to drill down into it, so that the database that we're still working on, that Defence funded for us to establish, but still working on, can really provide data-driven learnings for emergency responders and say, well, actually, we thought that we needed to focus on this, but the data says we should go focus on this to help emergency responders better understand electric vehicle technology. So if you skip to the next slide. So this is probably the point, the part that everybody wants to know, that EV battery fires, the traction battery, so the high voltage battery that sits under the car, they're very rare. If you go over to the next slide, that might explain that a bit better. So currently, since 2010, I've missed a zero there. Since 2010, we have been able to verify from more than at least two sources, less than 200 electric vehicle battery fires globally. So at the end of 2020, I don't have the 21 stats yet on total number of EVs in the world, but at the end of 2020, there were around 10 million. So we've got less than 200 that we've been able to verify. There will be others out there, but we haven't either been able to find them, or we haven't been able to verify that they actually happened. So,
I mean, compare that to internal combustion engine vehicles. That surely has to be much, much smaller, surely.
Far smaller. And we haven't done a comparison to internal combustion or hybrid vehicles, but an insurance company in the US, and most of the people tonight have maybe seen that, they have compared it, and it was something like, I can't remember the figures exactly, but 25 EV fires per 100,000 cars in the US. And then it was around the 3,000 or 4,000 mark per 100,000 cars for, interestingly, hybrids were actually catching fire at a greater rate than internal combustion engine, which is interesting in itself. But when we talk about 25 electric vehicles per 100,000, that's everything. That's not just battery. So on our database, if your Tesla, touch wood and hope it never happens to you, Tom, but if your Tesla has, I don't know, someone leaves a cigarette in the back seat and the back seat burns. But I know.
Heaven forbid.
Sorry, I know. Freaking you out now. But the traction battery is not involved in that, then that doesn't make our database. It's only if the high voltage traction battery has been involved. So when that insurance company talk about 25 EV fires per 100,000 cars, we think, we haven't been able to confirm with them yet, but we think that includes all types of fire, not just the battery. So the numbers actually, strictly speaking, are a little bit lower. But if you go, back a slide, if you go one back, this is probably the point that, the takeaway for tonight, I think, is they're very rare. But when they happen for emergency responders like myself and, the guys and girls in SES and Ambulance Victoria and VicPol, and I'm based in Victoria, as you can tell, but, across Australia and internationally, it's it's something different that we don't yet fully understand, and it's a new challenge. And I try to shy away from the comparison with internal combustion engine vehicles because, we as a firefighter, we've put loads of those out. That's fine. We know how to do that. But with an EV, it's new. It's not like an internal combustion engine fire. And I think the comparisons can sometimes be unhelpful. If firefighters want to know how it's the same, but actually it's completely new and different, and we need to basically learn from scratch. We've had 100 years to look at internal combustion engine vehicle fires, but we've really only had, 10 years, not even. When did the first Nissan Leaf hit the ground? 2012, somewhere around there.
About that, yep.
Yeah. Incidentally, Nissan Leaf, very safe car from a fire perspective. Definitely buy a Nissan Leaf if you're worried about fire. But
okay.
So it's a new and different challenge for emergency responders, and I think that's kind of the point that, as a project, we're trying to get across.
Okay, good. We've got one question here before we move on. I'm sure we'll probably address this later on, but we've got a question from Jason Archer saying, what is the main cause of battery fires? Is it ruptured battery pack? I'm sure we'll touch that on later on, Emma.
Yeah, I think I do have that in this pack. Primarily collision. So we do have currently, it's kind of equal between battery fault during manufacture and collision. That's due to the Konas and the Chevrolet Bolts and those recalls. But I think collision will soon, when we rerun the figures at the end of this year, it'll be collision or debris kicking up off the road. So we've had a few where one that sticks in my mind is a tow ball had come off another vehicle and then bounced on the freeway and hit the underside of an electric vehicle, and that had caused enough abuse for the pack to catch fire.
Okay.
But yeah, we do have some of those figures further down.
Yeah, good. Look, people who've just joined us tonight, welcome. And, we are talking EV fires, and I just want to quickly put up this question here, this statement from Andrew saying, based on Emma's stats, it almost seems like a non-issue. And I will agree, and people who know EVs well, it is almost a non-issue. But, this is kind of the thing we need to educate people who are interested in looking at EVs. And just to let them know that, despite what you hear in the news, they're actually really rare, as Emma has touched on already. So thank you, Emma.
Yeah, non-issue is probably I understand what you're getting at there, Andrew. I think that we need to also remember that I'm talking passenger electric vehicles, but we also have electric buses, trucks, motorbikes, scooters, e-bikes, and we're seeing a lot of fires with e-bikes and scooters because they take a lot more punishment, up and down curbs and bashing around the place as they move. Plus, things like your drill and all lithium-ion batteries are in so many things now. That what we learn from the small amount of electric vehicle battery fires is actually applicable across this wide range of things. The other thing we need to consider, and we do have those figures a bit later on as well, is while we've seen a drop in the number of electric vehicle passenger battery fires in 2021, as the cohort of EV passenger vehicles gets older, like when they're 20 years old and they've been through 100 potholes instead of maybe none, what will we see then? So we just, the quicker we can get on top of it and get the data-driven kind of learnings from this stuff, the better.
Yep, absolutely. I'll let you keep going, Emma, and we'll get some more questions a bit later on.
Yeah, sure. So I've got a couple of videos that I wanted to show everybody. And we'll do these right up front. So there are when a battery goes into thermal runaway, and I'll explain that a little further on, one of two things will happen. The vast majority of the time, about 90% of the time, we'll get ignition. And this video, which is on our website, is fabulous. It just shows all the characteristics of thermal runaway. So it's a different type of fire behavior. So you can just see now that black vapor. So this is vapor, it's not smoke. Nothing's actually on fire yet. So this is gases escaping from the battery cells. And I'm talking too much, but you can just hear that whistling noise. There's the ignition. The vapors, they're highly flammable. So they get they get burnt and sucked back. And then this is very characteristic. So you get this jet-like flame from underneath the vehicle because within the battery cells, the gases are escaping under pressure. So when they ignite, they kind of form these jet-like flames. So for EV drivers or any of the emergency responders that are, with us tonight, any of those characteristics, and I'll go through them again, but any of those characteristics spell that we have a problem and you need to get out of the way of the car, essentially. So that one, we can probably finish that one, and I'll move on to the next one. So in about 10% of cases, and this is a GIF, it'll just loop, about 10% of the cases we get an explosion like the one you've just seen. And again, when this loops back, look for the vapor. There it is. And we really only got 3 or 4 seconds before that explodes. Now, that's obviously, for obvious reasons, more common in enclosed spaces. So you get that buildup of vapor. There'll be an overheated battery cell somewhere that's caused ignition, and it deflagrates. I always struggle with that word. So it explodes really violently. But 10% of the time that happens, that equals currently 14 incidents globally since 2010. So again, a very low number.
Yeah, very minor. So obviously this is a ventilation issue. The gases can't escape and it triggers an explosion.
Yeah, we see occasionally in more open air spaces, under carports, that kind of thing, but primarily it's the enclosed spaces like this. Yeah. So we wanted to touch on, if you go down a couple of slides, I wanted to just touch on a few ways. First of all, a few ways in which people, I'm assuming we've got a lot of EV drivers on tonight, or people looking at EVs and thinking about how they charge, that kind of thing. So if you flick across to the next slide, before I came on, when we first talked about me coming on, I put the question out to all the various fire agency contacts that we're kind of talking to, and I got a list of really good stuff that they would like EV drivers to know. So when you talk about charging at home, make sure obviously that your unit has that RCM tick. That's Australian compliance. I believe it's also the same for New Zealand, but someone might be able to correct me on that. And make sure that it's installed to AS3000. And again, I believe that's an ASNZ standard. So ASNZ 3000, and it's Appendix P that talks about how charging should be installed. That's how it should be installed within your home by a qualified electrician. Mm-hmm. Extension cords, I see this pop up on the Facebook pages quite a lot, and some people do and some people don't, and generally you're not going to have a problem. But we say don't, because if it becomes too common, people will primarily use underrated extension cords for the amount of power that's trying to travel through them, and they can overheat. We haven't we do have 2 EV battery fires that started by the use of extension cords. Both of them were converted vehicles, and one, the very first one, which was actually back in 2010, actually on a ferry, which is very topical following the Felicity Ace cargo ship fire. The car owner actually had manufactured his own extension cord, and was charging on the ship. So kind of hardly surprising that one caught fire, I think. So don't use extension cords, please. If you're desperate and you're stranded somewhere, maybe, but watch it. But
and we're talking extension cords for like the 10 amp tail, right?
Yes, anything like that. If you can't use just your EVSE that comes in the boot of your car, don't plug an extension cord in. Try and find another power point or have one installed by a qualified electrician. Try not to use that as a regular thing, I guess is probably the best way of putting it. Check all your equipment for wear and tear. Replace it if you run over your plug or your cable or whatever. Replace them. Install smoke alarms in the area that you'll be charging. So if you don't have a smoke alarm in your garage, if you're assuming most people will charge up in their garage, have one installed. It's really cheap and easy to do, and it could be, well, they save lives every day.
That's a great idea.
And think about most people have seen the size of a fire truck, a tanker. Think about how a tanker would be able to get close enough to the place where you're going to be charging in order to try and suppress that fire. So think about your access. Think about things like, as a firefighter, we quite often go to properties where we can't get up the driveway because there are tree branches in the way, and we carry a chainsaw for that reason. We'll actually cut branches off if we need to get into the property a bit closer. Is there a low kind of carport or something we'd have to go through? How can you make it easy as possible for emergency services to actually reach that area?
Yep. Great advice. I've got a comment here from one of our members. He's saying, don't coil extension cords while in use. I assume that's a heat issue.
Great point. I think there's something around some kind of field that gets generated at that point as well. Again, someone far cleverer than me on that one will be able to, maybe Scott knows, but that's also a good point. Yeah.
Yep. I was just going to also point out one more comment. Sorry, Emma. And he's saying that make sure smoke alarms are linked to the rest of the house. That's also a good point.
Great point, and very well made, because personally my garage is separate to the house, and where I sleep is right down the other end of the house. So they do need to be loud enough and linked that you're actually going to hear it, and not just kind of wake up in the morning to a smoking pile of Tesla and
I do not want that.
slash EV. Yeah. Cool. Right. So no, that's both great points. So this slide here. So this one's really important. And again, I see this discussed on Facebook pages quite a lot. So if you're on this call, you're probably, looking at an EV, you own one, that kind of thing. But if you can imagine that there are all these emergency responders out there who, are busy doing all kinds of, stuff, it's difficult for emergency responders to know whether or not they're dealing with an electric vehicle. And in Australia, we're incredibly lucky to have the blue EV badge on front and rear number plates. Now, this is not mandatory across the rest of the world. Other countries, in fact, a colleague in the US that I was talking to recently, was saying there's nothing there to distinguish an ICE car with an EV in the US. So my understanding is a group of emergency responders, including firefighters from Fire Rescue New South Wales, actually worked on this a few years ago. It's currently mandatory in Victoria, New South Wales, South Australia, and Queensland. One of the guys I'm dealing with up in Northern Territory is doing an awesome job of getting it kind of, hurrying it up in the Northern Territory. But my kind of thoughts are, if you're an EV driver in any state or any of the states where it's not currently mandatory, do it anyway, because do you know what? It just helps us. It helps us identify that this is an electric vehicle. Same as the LPG, years back when LPG started becoming a thing, and the LPG badge goes on, and suddenly emergency responders can just see what they're dealing with. So make sure your badges are on your front and rear number plate, because it will just cut down the amount of time and angst that may occur at any kind of traffic incident for emergency responders. Familiarize yourself with your emergency response guide. So you can generally Google them. They're pretty easy to find. You don't need to kind of know it inside and out, but it's just a good thing to kind of have a look at. Sometimes it's in the glove box in the manual. I know the MGZS has a little pull-out tear card, which is pretty cool. And if you skip to the next slide, I'll talk more about that cut loop. So on some cars, this is my pride and joy, called Betty. The number plate is BUH, so she's Betty Boo. But
nice.
You can just see on the right there, that's the tag for the firefighter cut loop. Now, what that does is helps us when we arrive on scene. If we need to, we can cut that in two places. We take a chunk out of it, and that isolates the high voltage battery. So it means if we need to maybe extricate you from a vehicle, it means that if there's exposed orange high voltage cables, by cutting that cut loop, we're isolating all the high voltage power to the battery underneath the vehicle, and we can, extricate someone from a vehicle or deal with that vehicle with a much lower risk of electrocution. So I know that some people tuck it away, or it gets tucked under the cowling there. I know on the I'm trying to think now. I think it's the Kona also has a firefighter cut loop with a tag. Other vehicles have something similar. The Hyundai Ioniq 5 has a fuse with a pull tag. Make sure those tags can be seen at all times in case we need to find it quickly. So don't tuck them away. Just leave them on view for us.
Yep, great point.
And then.
Just one quick question from viewer here. It says, how about EV charging apartment buildings with regards to emergency access? It can be in a multi-level basement. It's actually a good question.
Yeah, that's something that is currently being discussed with the National Construction Code as well. And look, as we say, the risk is very low with EV fires, and to be honest with you, I think if EV-ready buildings are a great idea, and if we don't have EV-ready buildings, we'll see people just daisy chain extension cords to try and charge their car. So, we need to do something there. All we can say at the moment about kind of the multi-level apartment buildings is later this year we're doing some testing with various products that will have possibly have applicability to situations like that. But honestly, at the moment, it's be alert, not alarmed. If it's possible to put the charging near an entrance or exit, so it's a truck could potentially park on the street and run things up or down, then that's going to work too.
Yep, good.
Yeah.
There was a question earlier about. I think Scott might have asked the same question about QR codes for fireys to look at for instructions on how to cut the cable, I think.
Yeah, Hyundai do this very well. There's a QR code it's on the windscreen. I think it's in the door jamb and under the bonnet. And Hyundai do it. There are other models that you have the QR code on, but they're not springing to mind. only thing with that is for an emergency responder, you scan the QR code, but it brings up every single electrified Hyundai vehicle. So you still need to know if you're dealing with a Kona or a Ioniq, that kind of thing. So there's still a little bit of, brain power needed to kind of work through that. But no, they're a fantastic idea. I wish they were standard across every vehicle, because that would make life a lot easier. And for tow truck drivers as well, they can scan it and find the towing instructions. So
very true.
So if you skip to the next one. So the third thing that EV drivers can do is just that video we saw before, where you've got the dark vapor cloud. It's followed by a lighter vapor cloud. You hear popping noises, whistling noises, and then if you see flame, obviously by then, if you're seeing flame, then you know you've got a problem. But if you're seeing any kind of what looks like smoke coming from underneath your vehicle or coming off your electric vehicle, but even if there's no flame, you've got a problem. So if you see that, evacuate the area immediately, and we'll talk about that in the next slide, actually, if you skip to the next one. So, the signs that a battery is about to catch fire are those vapor clouds, but they look like smoke. People describe them like smoke. And if you see that, evacuate immediately. Just get away to somewhere else. And obviously, if you're on the side of the road, make sure you're going, into the bushes, rather than making sure you're not kind of accidentally going into oncoming traffic, that kind of thing. Call 000. 000 call takers do actually ask about the vehicle type now. So they will ask if you've got LPG or if you're electric or you're hybrid. So that question is asked, and clearly state that as well. If you know the make and model, by all means, that's really good information, because on a lot of trucks, as we're coming to scene, we can actually look up the emergency response guide as we're getting to you. Battery state of charge is an interesting one. I have a slide on that later on, but very briefly, I'm not sure we'll get to it because I'm talking way too much, but state of charge is, we have more testing to do on this, but if the battery state of charge is 50% or less, it's less likely to support thermal runaway. So you're less likely to see a fire. So if you know that you've got a 30% state of charge in your battery, then let them know that, because that could mean that, we've got a little bit more time up our sleeve to figure out what's going on here. It's not as likely to suddenly catch fire. If you've just come off charge and you've got 95%, then, that's more likely to support thermal runaway, and we're more likely to see a fire.
Okay, so let me repeat that. So the more charge you have, the higher the risk you have of achieving thermal runaway, just because there's more charge in the battery.
Yes, exactly. So roughly, we think it's around 50%. Anything under 50% state of charge, there's not enough energy in those battery cells to support thermal runaway, to kind of get those gases off venting and igniting. So we're less likely. It may still happen, but it's less likely to. And again, with the Felicity Ace, the cargo ship that everybody's been talking about that recently caught fire, with all car carriers globally for a number of years now, the rule is if they're carrying electric vehicles, they have to be 50% or less charged. You can't carry a vehicle over 50% for that reason.
Okay.
And of course, if you've got a proximity key, which pretty much every EV does, move it away. One of the risks to emergency responders at vehicle incidents involving electric vehicles is we can't hear an engine. So typically we turn up, first thing we do is turn the engine off, and we can hear that. But of course, with an electric vehicle, you can't. So if you can, turn the engine off and move the key away so it can't accidentally restart.
Yeah, good point. I think someone asked earlier about battery chemistry. Is there any correlation with LFP or NCA with regards to higher risk of thermal runaway?
LFP is typically touted to be safer. We have seen at least one LFP battery fire. I believe that happened in January. So, look, to be honest with you, I've become very cynical with battery chemistry. Sounds terrible. There's a semi-solid state battery that was used in an electric bus that also caught fire. So we've kind of got we've got this new technology and new chemistries coming. That's fantastic. but speak to me again when we've got 10 million on the road and we haven't had a fire.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
We need the sample size first.
I kind of hesitate to get too excited until we're kind of really sure, I think. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Let's move on to the next one. Next slide.
Yeah, thank you. And look, if you have a fender bender, something like this, call 000, of course. Talk about the make and model. Say you've got an electric vehicle. Put the brake on if you can. Switch it off. Move that key away. Evacuate to a safe place. Again, don't walk out into traffic. Make sure if you're out on the road, make sure you're going somewhere where, and most highways and things have the road barriers. Get behind the road barriers. I quite often turn out. We have a stretch of freeway in our brigade patch, and people will quite often be wandering around the side of the road kind of dazed and confused, which is understandable. But the first thing we do is very firmly put them behind the barrier so they're not going to come to harm. Warn other people to stay away. Even if you can't see smoke or vapor, move away from the vehicle. We just simply don't, you just simply don't know what could happen. And yep, as I said before, move that key away so we can't accidentally restart it. Yep. And if you flick down to the next one, if you have an accident with your EV, but you don't need to call emergency services, I think, if it's an EV and even for something small, it's a good idea just to call 000 and just as a precaution. But let's assume that maybe you get it towed. Make sure your tow truck operator has access to the emergency response guide for your vehicle. They shouldn't tow. Typically, they shouldn't tow with two wheels on the ground because the regen breaking into a damaged battery could cause a fire. That increases the risk of fire. And actually, in all the cases we've looked at, we've got I think it's 6 tow trucks and now 6 tow trucks that have been burnt from a reignition event.
Wow.
And 4 tow truck drivers that have suffered burns as a result. So we actually have more tow truck drivers injured than we do other emergency responders. So really important if you're an EV driver, before you get anything towed. And you saw the photo before of my own car a few years ago getting on the tow truck, and I didn't know to tell him. We just lobbed it up there and off he went, kind of thing. And now I think back on that and think, oh God, because the car in the picture in front of you is the same make and model, so you can see there that it's and sorry, if you go down one more, I'll show you how that one actually caught fire. So this is a poor gentleman in Canada a few years ago who accidentally put his car and boat down the boat ramp. And obviously, for anyone watching from kind of New South Wales and Queensland at the moment, if your vehicle is submerged, as floodwaters, if you've been affected by floodwaters as they recede, be alert, not alarmed. Be prepared. Look for those signs, those vapor clouds, appearing. It's unlikely to happen, but if a vehicle's been submerged, it can short circuit more than one cell. So you've got a slightly increased risk of fire there. Check for damage. If you've got anything orange that's exposed, cables, components, don't touch, call 000. Don't try to charge it or drive it. If it's been under flood water, chances are it's going to be a write-off. Don't try to charge it or drive it. You increase your risk there. Yep. And you should call 000. Fire Rescue New South Wales are doing a great job of helping EV drivers and people with lithium-ion home battery storage systems, that kind of thing. So give them a call and ask them what you should be doing.
I just want to echo a question or a couple of questions in the chat from earlier. So does the weather affect thermal runaway risk? I mean, the battery's a sealed cell, isn't it? So it shouldn't do.
Yeah, short answer is we don't know. I've had the same question from contact in Northern Territory. Does kind of that more tropical weather kind of affect batteries, or fire risk? But yeah, we currently we don't know. Sorry, I'll come back on it in a year and we'll see if we've got an answer for that one.
Yeah. And my question to you, Emma, is: are you also going to be educating tow truck drivers as well as part of your project?
Yeah, so we will be. Yeah, we've got a couple of just short online courses. I need to get out and talk to to some tow truck drivers and actually better understand, how they would, approach something and get a better kind of understanding of how they work. I've seen them as an emergency responder myself, but typically we're so busy doing something else, you're not kind of paying attention to how they work. The other thing, of course, is roadside assist. So some companies are carrying portable EVSE. And I said to one company, what's your procedure for checking whether you've just got a flat battery or whether you've got a damaged battery? And they hadn't really thought about it. So we're putting some kind of ideas around that to go, well, if you see these signs of thermal runaway, that your battery is about to catch fire, or if you see anything exposed that's orange, basically don't plug it in. You increase the risk of battery fire in those situations.
Yep. Oh, these are really good questions. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole supply chain of people we need to kind of educate, with this. And we're in a fantastic position with, dare I say it, so few EVs on the road in Australia at the moment, and we're tapped into this amazing kind of global network of people, that fire agencies and battery experts, and so we're in a great position to kind of really learn as much as we can. And get everybody, familiar and trained.
Yeah, for sure. It's better to be proactive, definitely.
Yeah. So I've got a few other slides here. Maybe just flick through these fairly quickly, talking about fire suppression. Sorry, I'm taking up loads of time here.
No,
and happy to take questions. If you go to the next one, just to give everybody a bit of a visual. So I probably should have put this at the start, but we're talking about the traction battery. So typically it's made up of your individual lithium-ion battery cells. These are the blue one you can see there is a cylindrical cell, 18650. Multiple cells make a module, and multiple modules make a pack. And this sits underneath the vehicle there. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about a battery fire. It goes into what we call thermal runaway, and that's a chemical process, an unstable chemical process, and it's a heat. The battery cells short circuit and heat up, so that's why it's so difficult to actually extinguish. It's not like a traditional fire that we're kind of used to. And actually, the next slide talks about what we currently know about cause. So you can see that, the battery fault is primarily due to those Kona's Chevrolet bolts in the US primarily, and then collision. Collision is always going to be number one. And of course, as you can see, a lot of them, we just, it's not known, or we're not able to find out.
Did you ever find out what was the cause of that one in the apartment or the basement car park with the Tesla that caught fire spontaneously?
That one, actually, a manhole cover hit the underside of the vehicle sometime before. So we don't have any details of whether the manhole cover was up and it drove into it, or whether it flicked up as the car was over the top of it.
Wow.
But that was the cause as it was described.
Okay. I mean, that's another reason not to drive through floodwater with an EV. You just don't know what debris is lying around.
Yeah, that's it.
Water.
Very much so. Yeah, absolutely. So the next couple of slides just talk about thermal runaway, and I'll just touch on that quickly. So let's assume that, manhole covers hit the underside of your electric vehicle, and one cell, so we can see a group of cells here, one cell has been what we call abused. That's the terminology for it. So it's been abused, it's short-circuited, and it starts to heat up, and it dissipates that heat into all the surrounding cells, and it heats up so rapidly, it has to send that heat somewhere. Eventually, the very top, the blast cap or safety valve at the top of the battery will pop, and it'll start to release those gases that we looked at before. So those vapors. So you got the dark vapor cloud, which is the heavy metals, and then a lighter vapor cloud, other gases. They're primarily hydrogen. So they're toxic and they're flammable, as we saw before. So the first battery cell that was abused, the cap will pop off. It'll start to expel those gases. It heats up all the other cells around it. Those cells will start to do the same thing. And then once we've kind of got to that point, we've got what we call thermal runaway. So unstable chemical process. And if you go to the next slide, you can see here. So there's our original cell that was abused. Really, the only way currently, or what's best practice, is to use a lot of water to cool down. We use the water to dissipate. That water helps dissipate that heat. It cools that down and it slows and eventually stops that thermal runaway process. Having said that, and bearing in mind that these are very rare, it's not uncommon for incidents to go for 3 or 4 hours, where you've got firefighters actually putting water onto the underside of a vehicle for several hours, because as you can imagine, your batteries are there, and then you've got a module around that, and then you've got another layer around that, and then you've got protective layers around that. So trying to get water, to cool those cells down is difficult and will take a long time because of the amount of protection. If we can get water straight into the battery pack, then happy days. We'll cut that time down quite dramatically, but currently it takes a little while.
Okay.
And there's just a bit of a graphic on that. So yeah, the battery. Yeah, next one, that's it, the battery. And if you scroll one more down, there's a couple of some fire agencies will actually jack up one side of the car so they can get the water under the vehicle easily. And then some are actually, people on the call have probably seen this, dunk the whole thing. And the photo on the right is a $250,000 BMW i8 that went into thermal runaway, started smoking. Wow. And the fire brigade, Belgian fire brigade, just brought in a container. They're trialing this as a method of, and they'll leave that in there for several days and store it like that. So it's not recommended by every manufacturer. Tesla in particular don't recommend this, because when you pull it out, you've possibly short-circuited another cell and then you get another fire. But look, it's something that's being trialed.
Okay. This is a good point here from one of our viewers. Like, is there something other than water that's sort of more cryogenic that makes it colder to freeze the battery, I suppose?
Not that I know of. So there are some water lances being developed that kind of slide, like a long hose that slides in under the vehicle and then punches up through the bottom of the battery and then floods the battery, which makes sense, but may not be logistically kind of sensible. How do you get there? How do you get it there? It's quite a big piece of equipment. It's not something that will probably fit on a fire truck, and when the car, particularly cars like that are lower to the ground, if the tires have already burnt away, can you actually physically get this thing underneath? But in terms of cryogenically, there's nothing that I've heard of, but whoever said that might be onto their first $1 million idea. So, yeah.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, yes. And if you turn it to $1 million idea, I'll have a Tesla performance. Thank you very much.
That's right.
So the next slide, again, this is, it's not great, but it's another method that is being used if you have an electric vehicle in thermal runaway on fire in an area where it's not affecting anything. Can it just burn out? Because by letting it burn out completely, we actually remove the stranded energy from the high voltage battery as well. So again, if it's possible, that's something to consider. And for those of you who remember the Tesla big battery fire down here near Geelong, which was actually just near our brigade area, so I went down to that myself. It took a few days, but we actually just let that burn out. Protected the exposures, let the whole thing burn out, and that meant we had it destroyed the whole pack, but it just meant we could take that whole thing out, and we didn't really need to worry about kind of reignition and stranded energy.
Okay. Controlled burning.
Yeah, exactly. And keep going for another slide. So here's what we'll be testing later this year with hopefully up in Sydney with Fire Rescue New South Wales. What we know, or what we think happens, our theory based on lots of conversations with awesome companies like Jolt and JetCharge and those guys, is that when an EV catches fire, goes into thermal runaway while it's connected to AC charging, assuming that it's compliant and it's installed properly, it will cut the power between the charging unit and the distribution board. So in theory, as firefighters, we're safe to put water on both of those things. However, as a firefighter, there's nothing currently to tell us whether or not that charging unit has been cut from power. So, and if you go to the next slide, I'll show you what we know about DC. So with DC, it's a little different. DC chargers obviously are far more sensitive, so it all actually cut between the charger and the car. And if you go to the next slide, if you're an emergency responder and you come across this situation, shut everything down, have everything shut down, which is typically what we do anyway. If we came to, say, a downed power line, we'd have all that section shut down by the power company. Or if we have something, you know, electrical on fire within a shopping centre, for instance, someone would go to the distribution board, typically a qualified electrician, shut it all down, and then we would know that it's now safe to put water onto.
Yep. Have there been any examples of chargers catching fire in Australia, as far as you know?
Not in Australia, but overall, of all our incidents that we found, a third of them occur while the vehicle's connected to energised AC or DC charging. We aren't able to say at the moment whether DC charging is you're more likely to catch fire connected to DC charging, but typically charging is not the cause of the fire. It's just that EVs spend a lot of time plugged in. So it's hardly surprising that a third of them occur, you know, while the vehicle's connected. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So next slide. Sorry, we'll try and get through these a bit quicker because I know we're running out of time. But reignition. So people talk about reignition a lot. This happens 10% of the time. So in very few incidents, probably 15 to 16 of them overall. And if you go to the next slide, we talk about reignition, but it's a bit of a misnomer because the battery cell that caught fire doesn't reignite. It's actually a second cell in perhaps another module that was also, let's say we've had a collision. The first cell in module 1 has been damaged. That's caught fire. We suppress it. But what we can't know is that battery 5 in module 2 was also damaged in that initial collision. And it's not till we move it perhaps onto a tow truck that it kind of short circuits and then off it goes again, kind of thing. So that's what causes reignition. And if you go down to the next slide, these numbers are actually old. So it's still 6 cases where a tow truck's been damaged, but we've actually got 4 tow truck drivers that have been injured in reignition incidents. And yep, for the first responders on the call, again, this is best practice from what we've learned from talking to a lot of firefighters. Monitor it with a thermal imaging camera. That's the best way to check. You know, if you've got temperature going up, then you've still got a problem. Usually around 30 minutes. That's what the guys in the Netherlands do, and I believe Norway. And you're listening for those popping noises, because if you've got a reignition event, you're going to hear the popping again for where the cells start to burst. So,
yeah. Okay. And
a super, super quick look at, go one more. So as I said before, in terms of, about a third occur while connected to energized charging, but then roughly a third, 33% of the time, roughly 30% of the time, they happen in underground or enclosed spaces while they're driving or outside and just parked and not connected to charging. So it's kind of a bit even at the moment with that. I expect that'll probably stay the same. And the next one, probably the biggest surprise for me, I was expecting, the whole kind of thing of electricity and water doesn't mix. I was kind of expecting a bigger electrocution risk, but because we're dealing with a DC high voltage battery that's isolated from the rest of the vehicle, electrocution risk is actually very low. And I've got some more information coming on that to the website. So we haven't found any evidence of or any even near misses where firefighters have been worried about being electrocuted. Sorry, they've been worried about being electrocuted, but the risk has been very low. So
that's good to know.
That's it's been interesting to kind of go down that rabbit hole. And the next slide is back about that. So under 50%, less likely to. You'll see the vapors escaping, but we're less likely to see flame. So again, we're testing that towards the end of the year. And then heat release rate. for the kind of more technical people, flame temperature can be a lot hotter, can be up to 2,700 degrees versus 1,000 for internal combustion engine vehicle. So typically, if we know we're dealing with an electric vehicle, we'll stand further back as well. But heat release rate is roughly the same. Yeah. And I promise I'll stop talking, maybe take some questions, but overall, this is what we found. They're far less likely. They're very rare, but they just present a different challenge for emergency responders. And, that's a great thing about our database is by drilling down to all this detail, we 8 months ago, I would have said to you, we need to look at electrocution risk, but actually now I'm like, no, I think we need to look at, for instance, how do we get a water lance underneath an electric vehicle, or how can we suppress it more quickly, or what can we tell EV drivers to help them keep emergency responders safe? So the database has been great for that. So it's just a new and different challenge. They're not like internal combustion engine vehicle fires. They're different. They're very rare. And that's a bit of a double-edged sword, because if they were more frequent, we'd probably learn more. But we like that they're rare, and we can just kind of learn from what's happening globally.
That's great. Do you have any stats on, just coming from a healthcare point of view, do you have any stats on injuries from EV fires at all?
Not from passenger electric vehicles. Obviously, for emergency responders, anyone in that vicinity should be wearing breathing apparatus. I do know of one incident in, I'm going to say Sweden, but I might have that wrong, where some people in an apartment were stripping down lithium batteries from e-scooters and rewiring them into new packs. And so when the packs went into thermal runaway, the whole thing went up, and the wall of the building actually was kind of exploded out. And the firefighters went into the apartment in breathing apparatus, but 2 police officers actually went up initially and then were hospitalized because they'd taken in some of those gases, which includes hydrogen fluoride, hydrogen cyanide. So they were hospitalized for that. So I think that, that the advice that we talked about before, if you see anything that looks like smoke, and in any, car fire, anything that looks like smoke, get away from it. Don't breathe that in, but particularly if it's an electric vehicle, because there are some nasties in there.
Yeah, good point. Got another question from Scott. Actually, he's got some great questions today. To emergency responders worry the next incident is an EV, and they aren't sure how to deal with it.
Yeah, I think look, I'll speak for myself. I might have, at the risk of annoying some of the other emergency responders out there, I think we're pretty good at rolling with the punches. And I was talking to the team out at Red Hill CFA, which is on the other side of the Port Phillip Bay from me. And they had a Porsche Taycan Turismo, which I think was the only one in the country, as far as I know, that had a 12-volt battery fire, not the high-voltage battery. They had just the 12-volt battery was on fire. And when they arrived on scene, these guys had never seen an EV before. Sorry, they'd seen them around, but they hadn't dealt with one, and I don't think any of them had driven one. And they arrived on scene, spoke to the owner, worked out what kind of car it was, got on the phone to Porsche, worked through the steps that were, kind of the technician on the other end of the phone and got up the emergency response guide, worked through it and worked it out. So I think the piece of advice I would give is that it's sensible. If you're an emergency responder of any type, it's sensible to have a look and see whether you're dealing with an electric vehicle. From now on, do it every time you turn out to a traffic incident or any time you turn out to anything. It's sensible to look for those blue EV badges on the number plates. It's sensible to look for the external badging, talk to the driver and check whether you're dealing with an electric vehicle. But I don't think anyone should be worried as such. I mean, there's lots of training coming from all agencies. There's lots of information gathering, and I think as I said before, we've got 30,000, probably getting on for maybe 40,000. I'm waiting for the new State of Electric Vehicles report from the Electric Vehicle Council. But we've got this kind of smallish number, and we've got this great opportunity to learn before that becomes a biggish number, hopefully soon.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this is a great question for, I guess, some of our viewers who are still learning about EVs and, curious about EVs and what they're all about. I guess this is a great question, actually. My garage is on the house. Is it safe to say it's very low risk to leave an EV plugged in and charging overnight?
Yes, it's very low risk. And as long as your garage is not underwater, or as long as you haven't hit a manhole cover on the way home from work in your electric vehicle, you're probably more likely to have your another electrical appliance, or if you're going to have a fire, it's a very, very low risk. Of course, as I said before, make sure you've got smoke alarms in that area. So if something does happen, whether it's your car or not, you've got as much warning as possible. Think about how emergency responders are going to get to you and be able to get close to that to your garage. Check your cables. If you've had a rough drive home from work and hit some gravel or potholes or whatever, have a quick check of your car. All the usual things that you do anyway, I think. But no, I have my own electric vehicle plugged in the garage near some storage batteries, and it's a be alert, not alarmed message, I think. Yeah.
So here's a good point from Nathan. Maybe pop the front bonnet as the high voltage cutters there if you're involved in an accident, I guess.
Yeah, great point. If you can pop that, because the challenge again for emergency responders is that all models are so different. The Ioniq 5's got the pull tab, and the Tesla's got the cut loop, and the Mitsubishi Outlander is a fuse that's kind of hidden way in the engine bay. And if you can, if it's safe to do so, and you can do that even with your phone app from a distance, absolutely brilliant idea.
I guess we're probably too early with these new cars, but I guess do you have any stats on newer, later model EVs and battery fires at this stage?
Not at this stage, and it's very difficult to actually, wherever we can, we've tried to get the model year of the vehicle, but that's actually very difficult to get. I don't know if we had that slide where we talked about we've actually seen the drop off in the number of vehicle fires overall, but we maybe I didn't put it in, but we through 2019 and 2020 we saw a bit of a spike. Sorry Tom, I don't think I put that one in, okay. But I can send it to you for sharing later. But we saw a bit of a spike in battery fires overall. In 2021, we saw a 25% reduction. So the spike in 2019, 2020 was due to the Kona recall and the Chevrolet Bolt. And then all those vehicles were recalled. So last year, we actually saw a drop off in the number of battery fires, 25%. So it's a big drop. This year, we've had 3. And it's mid-March. So I expect that the numbers to be similar this year. But as we get more on the road, more collisions, more little bingles, that kind of thing, and as I said before, as they get older and they go through loads of potholes, we may see that number kind of rise. But in terms of, just in general, newer vehicles in general are typically far safer than their previous variant. So we'll see those safety systems just improve and improve, I think.
Yep, makes sense. Question from Charles Gregory, one of our members. I've heard first responders have a device that plugs into the charge port to disable them from moving, perhaps. Can you explain this?
Yeah, sure. So it's called an emergency plug. I'm smiling because I was just talking about that today. We're getting our hands on one to test. And my evil plan here, Tom, is to line up a bunch of cars. I might throw some ICE cars in there in the mix as well, give the emergency plug to a bunch of firefighters and don't tell them where the charge ports are, and make them find them.
You have to film
but essentially, I think so. But essentially the emergency plug it looks like a normal charge plug. It's kind of a boomerang shape, has a type 1, type 2 at either end. And the idea is that, as I said before, as emergency responders, we can't hear an engine noise. So we can't sort of tell if the car's switched off. And in the case of Teslas, it doesn't really switch off. It just kind of shuts down. So what the emergency plug does is when you plug it into the charge port, it tricks the car into thinking that it's charging, and therefore the car immobilizes itself. So it won't move. So it's an immobilization tool. However, firefighters have got to know, and I think it was Charles actually who had the kind of a great graphic on Facebook of where all the different charge ports are on different models, which I must get from him.
Yes.
And so we have that challenge that the charge ports are in different locations, and be like the Nissan Leaf we saw before, the charge port's in the front, but it's had a nose to tail. So we're not going to be able to plug anything into that. So it is a tool that's in the mix for testing to see how that could work and how that could maybe fit on the truck.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm just trying to see if there's any other questions, but we might possibly leave it there, Emma, unless you've got anything else you want to finish up with on your end.
Nope, just a big thank you to you and to everyone that's been listening to me bang on for an hour. I think you do a fantastic job kind of just demystifying everything, and it's been really good to kind of share some of what we know. And anyone that's an emergency responder can go to the website, so it's just evfiresafe.com, and there's a downloadable pack that has most of what we've looked at tonight. You can just go download that for free and get in touch if you've got questions, and join the mailing list, because we've got all this testing happening as well, and we'll be sharing that information as we do it, as we test and as we find out more. So yeah. But thank you.
No, thank you, Emma. As we say goodbye, I'll leave your details up on the screen here if you guys want to get in touch with Emma. And I guess if you want to get involved with the project or get more information somehow, her details are up there, mobile number and email. So she's available on social media as well. So plenty of avenues to contact Emma. And I just want to once again thank you very much for coming on the show. I've certainly learned a lot tonight, and I guess
great, good.
There's always a little part of me saying, what if the car does catch fire? So it's always in the back of my mind. But knowing that it's such a rare event, as you've said many times tonight, it's good to know. And you've given us some great practical tips on what to do if we do come across like thermal runaway. Heaven forbid that doesn't happen, but if it does, this is what we do. So it's been great. I might even go back and watch some of this stuff for just to revise.
Absolutely. And look, happy to kind of jump on and do it all again towards the end of the year when we've done some testing, and maybe even I wonder if we can actually live stream some of that. Leave that with me. That could be cool. We'll see what we're doing and see if we can maybe capture some of that. But there'll be by the end of the year we'll have a whole bunch of new information that will be really good to kind of go back and have a look at again. So
yeah, perfect. Thanks, Emma. And on behalf of all the viewers tonight, thank you again. And before we go, I just want to quickly just wrap up on the poll. We did ask a question tonight before Emma joined us, and it was regarding vehicle fires. Are you more or less worried about battery EVs compared to ICE vehicles? That's internal combustion engine cars. And the winner is, I'll just end the poll now. And it looks like the winner is 54% of people saying, I'm not worried about fires at all in vehicles. So that's good to know. The next highest is battery electric vehicles worry me less than ICE cars. So that's good. And next category is battery electric vehicles worry me more than ICE cars, 13%. And then 13% also said I'm equally worried about both. So it looks like most people are not so worried about EVs. And it looks like the message has gotten through tonight. So
great. Well, the 13% are very welcome to get in touch, and I can talk them through it. But that's really interesting. I might get you to send me the results of that. Actually,
I will.
We'll pop that on the website.
Definitely. Thanks, Emma. I'll let you go, and I'll say goodbye to everyone. Thanks, Emma. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Bye. Thanks, Emma. That's great to have you on tonight. Emma Sutcliffe, everyone, from evfiresafe.com. And I'll leave Emma's details in the video description after we finish the live stream tonight. So I learned a lot tonight, guys and girls. Hopefully you did as well. And of course, you can always go back and watch some of this video if you missed what we said earlier on about battery fires in EVs. And this EV Fire Safe is a great resource, so have a look at that as well. There's plenty of content as well for those of you who own EVs or are thinking about buying an EV. I think battery fire is something we all think about every now and then. Certainly new EV owners do, and people thinking about EVs. So definitely get yourself educated with the resource that Emma has made available for us. World first, by the way. I'm so proud of what she's done. It's great to have this resource coming out of our own backyard. So thank you, Emma, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight on tonight's live stream. I hope you've found it informative and entertaining at the same time. I always do. And thank you for everyone who is engaged in the live chat as well. And feel free to leave a comment as well if you've got any other questions for Emma about fires in EVs. I'll be sure to pass them on as well. All right, take care, everyone. I will leave the outro credits. There we go. And hope you all have a fantastic week, and I shall see you at the next Ludicrous Feed live stream. Take care, everyone, and as always, happy charging.